Hello, my dear listeners, and welcome back to Granny Stories. I'm here to share another tale from my family's journey, one that taught me the hardest lesson about setting boundaries with those we love most. Picture this. You're planning your dream wedding, and your own mother calls to demand $50,000, not for your wedding, but for your sister's. When you say no, she threatens to disown you and turn the entire family against you. That's exactly what happened to me. And today I'm going to tell you how I learned to stand up to financial manipulation, even when it came from my own mother. But before we dive in, if you enjoy these real family stories and the lessons we can learn from them, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps Granny Stories reach more people who need to hear these messages. Let me start from the beginning. My name is, you can call me Granny, and this story takes place about 15 years ago when I was in my early 30s. I had just gotten engaged to my wonderful husband James after 3 years of dating. We were both working good jobs. I was a marketing coordinator and he was an engineer. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable and excited about our future together. My family situation was complicated. My mother, Linda, had always been what I now recognize as financially manipulative, though I didn't have words for it back then. She had a way of making money problems everyone else's responsibility while presenting herself as the victim. My sister Emma was the golden child, 5 years younger than me, and in my mother's eyes, she could do no wrong. Emma had been with her boyfriend Marcus for about 2 years, and they'd recently gotten engaged as well. The difference was Emma expected everyone else to pay for her dreams. I need to paint you a picture of how my mother operated. Throughout my childhood, she would guilt-trip family members into paying for things she wanted. When I was 16 and wanted to take a school trip to Europe, she told me we couldn't afford it. But somehow, she found the money for Emma's expensive dance classes, designer clothes, and private tutoring. The message was always clear. Emma's needs came first. As an adult, I'd learned to keep some distance from these dynamics. I lived about 2 hours away from my family, which gave me perspective. James had helped me see that some of my family's behavior wasn't normal or healthy, but I still loved them and wanted to maintain a relationship. Now, if you've ever dealt with a manipulative family member, I want you to know you're not alone. The comments on my videos are filled with similar stories, and I read every single one of them. If this story is resonating with you so far, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me know which stories connect most with you, my dear listeners. James and I had been engaged for about 3 months when we started seriously planning our wedding. We had a budget of $25,000, which we'd been saving for over a year. It wasn't extravagant, but it would give us a beautiful day with about 100 guests, mostly family and close friends. I was excited to share our plans with my family. I called my mother one evening in February, full of enthusiasm about the venue we'd just booked and the dress I'd found. "Mom, I can't wait for you to see the venue," I said. "It's this beautiful garden setting with string lights, and the price includes catering for 100 people. Her response was lukewarm. "That's nice, dear. How much is all this costing you?" I should have sensed something in her tone, but I was too excited. "We're budgeting around $25,000. We've been saving for over a year." There was a pause. Then she said something that should have been a red flag. "Well, that's quite a lot of money for one day. I hope you know what you're doing." At the time, I thought she was just being practical. I didn't realize she was already calculating how she could use our wedding budget to her advantage. 2 weeks later, Emma called me, sobbing. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she wailed. "Marcus proposed, and I want this perfect wedding, but Mom says we can't afford anything nice. She says maybe we should just do a courthouse wedding. I felt for my sister. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted her to be happy. What kind of wedding are you thinking about? I asked. Nothing too crazy, she said. Maybe 200 guests, a nice venue, good food, flowers, a band. Just a normal wedding. But Mom ran some numbers and said it would cost at least $40,000, maybe more. 200 guests. A band instead of a DJ. I started to see where this was going, but I still didn't understand the full picture. The next month was relatively quiet. James and I continued our wedding planning, booking vendors and sending save the dates. I noticed my mother seemed less interested in our wedding details than I expected, but I attributed it to her being busy with work. Then, in early April, about 4 months before our August wedding, my mother called me on a Tuesday evening. I can still remember exactly where I was sitting in my apartment kitchen, going through wedding RSVPs. I need to talk to you about something important, she said, and her tone was serious in a way that made my stomach clench. What's wrong? I asked. It's about Emma's wedding. We've been looking at options and we found the perfect venue, but we need to put down a significant deposit soon or we'll lose it. That's exciting, I said, though something fell off. What venue is it? The Riverside Country Club. Where your cousin Sarah had her wedding. It's absolutely beautiful, and Emma fell in love with it the moment she saw it. I didn't know the venue. Sarah's wedding there had cost her parents well over $60,000, and that was 5 years earlier. My heart started racing. Mom, how much is the deposit? I asked. That's what I need to talk to you about. The deposit is $15,000, and we need to pay it by next Friday. But here's the thing. Your father and I simply don't have that kind of money right now. His business has been slow this quarter, and we've had some unexpected expenses. I waited, sensing she wasn't finished. Emma is heartbroken. She's been dreaming of this wedding, and she deserves to have something beautiful. She's always been such a good daughter, and you know how hard she's worked in school. The guilt trip was starting. I could feel it building. I was hoping, my mother continued, that since you and James are doing well financially, and since you're having such a simple wedding, maybe you could help us with the deposit. It would mean the world to Emma and to me. Simple wedding. There it was, the first dig at our choices, designed to make us feel guilty for not spending more, or alternatively, for having money we weren't sharing. Mom, I said carefully, that's a big request. James and I would need to discuss it. Of course, she said quickly. I wouldn't expect an answer right now. But could you let me know by tomorrow evening? The venue is very popular, and if we can't secure it, Emma will be devastated. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to pause here for those of you who might be watching this while dealing with your own family financial pressure. The tactics my mother was using, the artificial urgency, the emotional manipulation, the implied criticism of our choices, these are classic signs of financial manipulation. If you're recognizing these patterns, please consider subscribing to this channel. I share a lot of stories about setting boundaries with difficult family members, and you might find them helpful. That night, I barely slept. I kept turning the conversation over in my mind, trying to figure out why it felt so wrong. On one hand, helping family should be natural, right? On the other hand, $15,000 was more than half our wedding budget. When I told James about the call the next morning, his reaction was immediate and clear. Absolutely not, he said, not even pausing to consider it. But it's my sister's wedding, I said, and it's just a loan. They'd pay us back. James set down his coffee and looked at me seriously. Sarah, let me ask you some questions. When has your mother ever asked your sister to help with something financially? I thought about it. Never. But Emma's still in school and... Emma's 26, James interrupted gently. She graduated 2 years ago and has a full-time job. Second question. When your mother said they'd pay it back, did she mention when or how? She hadn't. In fact, the word loan had come from me, not from her. Third question, James continued. Why does Emma need a $60,000 wedding when she and Marcus have been together for 2 years and, from what you've told me, haven't been saving money? I didn't have good answers to any of his questions. Look, James said, taking my hands, I love that you want to help your family. It's one of the things I love most about you. But this doesn't feel like helping. This feels like enabling poor financial planning at the expense of our future. But what if Emma can't have the wedding she wants? I asked. Then she'll have a wedding she can afford, like most people do, James replied. Sarah, we've been saving for our wedding for over a year. We've made sacrifices. Remember when we didn't take that vacation to California so we could put that money toward the wedding fund? Why should we give up our dreams to fund Emma's more expensive dreams? He was right, and I knew it. But the guilt was overwhelming. I called my mother that evening, my hands shaking as I dialed. Hi, Mom. I've thought about what you asked, and I'm afraid, James, and I can't help with Emma's wedding deposit. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. I'm sorry, what did you say? My mother finally asked, her voice cold. I said we can't help with the deposit. It's just too much money, and we have our own wedding to pay for. I can't believe what I'm hearing, she said, and I could hear her voice rising. Your sister needs help, and you're refusing? Mom, it's $15,000. That's more than half our wedding budget. Your wedding budget that you chose to keep small, she snapped. You could afford to help if you wanted to. You're just being selfish. The word selfish hit me like a slap. It was my mother's go-to accusation whenever I didn't do what she wanted. I'm not being selfish, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm being responsible with our money. Responsible, she laughed bitterly. You're making more than enough money to help your sister, and you're choosing not to. Do you know how heartbroken Emma is going to be? Emma can have a beautiful wedding with a smaller budget, I said. So you think your sister doesn't deserve nice things? You think she should settle for less just because you won't help her? The conversation was spiraling, and I could feel my mother's manipulation tactics kicking into high gear. Everything was becoming my fault. Emma's disappointment, the family's financial stress. Even Emma's worth as a person was somehow tied to whether I gave them money. Mom, this isn't about what Emma deserves. It's about what's financially reasonable. What's financially reasonable, my mother repeated mockingly, is helping your family when they need it. But I guess I raised a daughter who cares more about money than her own sister. And then she hung up. I want to pause here to say something to anyone who's been on the receiving end of that kind of emotional manipulation. When someone hangs up on you in anger because you've set a boundary, that's actually confirmation that you made the right choice. A person who respected your decision would have accepted your no gracefully. If you're learning to set boundaries with difficult family members, please subscribe to this channel. I share a lot of stories about these challenging relationships, and the comment community here is incredibly supportive. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Usually, my mother and I talk several times a week, but I didn't hear from her at all. I also didn't hear from Emma, which was unusual since we typically texted regularly. Then, that Saturday, my phone started ringing. First, it was my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. Sarah, honey, your mother told me about the situation with Emma's wedding. I'm so disappointed in you. My stomach dropped. What did she tell you? that Emma found her dream venue, but you refuse to help with the deposit even though you can afford it. That poor girl is heartbroken. I could hear the judgment in my aunt's voice, and I realized my mother had been making phone calls, spreading her version of events. Aunt Carol, there's more to the story than that, I started to say. I'm sure there is, she said coldly. But the bottom line is family helps family. When I was your age, I would have done anything to help my sister. The call ended awkwardly, and I sat there feeling sick to my stomach. An hour later, my cousin David called with a similar message. Then my Uncle Tom. Then my grandmother. By Sunday evening, I had received calls from 6 family members, all with variations of the same theme. I was selfish, I was letting Emma down, and I was failing as a sister and daughter. The worst call came from my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was 78 and had always been one of my favorite people in the family. I never thought I'd see the day when you'd turn your back on your sister, she said, her voice shaky with emotion. Your grandfather and I always thought you were such a caring girl. Grandma, I do care about Emma, I said, tears starting to flow. But $15,000 is a lot of money. Money isn't everything, sweetheart. Family is what matters. Your mother is so upset, and poor Emma is just devastated. How can you live with yourself knowing you could fix this, but you're choosing not to? That call broke something in me. My grandmother's disappointment felt like a physical weight on my chest. By Monday, I was an emotional wreck. James found me crying in our bedroom when he came home from work. They all hate me, I sobbed. My whole family thinks I'm a terrible person. James sat on the bed and pulled me close. Tell me what happened. I explained about all the phone calls, about my grandmother's disappointment, about feeling like I was letting everyone down. Sarah, James said gently, do you see what's happening here? Your mother couldn't convince you directly, so now she's recruited the entire family to pressure you. This is manipulation on a massive scale. But what if they're right? I asked. What if I am being selfish? Let me ask you something, James said. When's the last time anyone in your family helped you financially? I thought about it. I can't think of a time. When you needed money for your car repair last year, who did you ask for help? You, I said quietly. And my savings. When Emma needed money for her security deposit on her apartment, who did she call? Mom and Dad, I admitted. And when your parents had financial problems with your dad's business 3 years ago, did they ask Emma to help? No, Emma was still in school then. But they asked you to co-sign that loan for them, didn't they? They had. I'd forgotten about that, or maybe I'd tried to forget. When my father's business had cash flow problems, my mother had asked me to co-sign a $10,000 business loan. I'd done it without question, and they'd paid it back, but it had taken them over a year. James, I said slowly, I think I see what you're saying, but I still feel terrible. Of course you do. You have a good heart. But Sarah, your mother is using your good heart against you. She's turned your family into her army, and they're all attacking you for having a boundary. That Tuesday, my mother called me again. I hope you're happy, she said without any greeting. Emma had to tell the venue they couldn't take it. She was in tears for 2 hours. Mom, Emma can find another venue that fits her budget. Her budget, my mother scoffed. Her budget is whatever we can afford to give her, which isn't much thanks to you. What do you mean, thanks to me? If you had helped with the deposit, we would have been able to make the monthly payments. Now she has to settle for some cheap place that will ruin her wedding photos and her memories. I felt the familiar guilt rising in my chest, but this time I tried to push back. Mom, what was the total cost of the country club wedding going to be? What does that matter? It matters because a $15,000 deposit usually means a much larger total cost. What was the full price? There was a pause. Around $50,000, she said finally. My heart stopped. $50,000? Mom, that's twice my entire wedding budget. Well, maybe if you had planned a proper wedding, you'd understand what things cost. There it was again. The dig at my choices, designed to make me feel guilty for not spending more. Who was going to pay the other $35,000? I asked. Another pause. We were going to figure it out. Maybe take out a loan or ask other family members to help. So you wanted me to give you $15,000 so you could ask other people for more money? We wanted you to help your sister have the wedding she deserves, my mother snapped. But clearly, you care more about hoarding your money than helping family. If you're still with me at this point in the story, I want to thank you for listening. Stories like this can be hard to hear because they might remind you of your own family dynamics. But I think it's important to share these experiences because they help us all recognize unhealthy patterns. If this story is helping you process your own experiences, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to Granny Stories. Your support means the world to me. The emotional manipulation continued for another week. I received more calls from family members, each one expressing disappointment in my decision. My mother sent me guilt-inducing text messages daily. Emma herself finally called me, crying. Why don't you want me to be happy? She sobbed into the phone. Emma, I do want you to be happy, I said. I want you to have a beautiful wedding. Then help me. You have the money, and you know I'd do the same for you. Emma, would you give me $15,000 if I asked for it? That's different, she said immediately. You don't need it like I do. How do you know I don't need it? Because you're having a cheap wedding, she said, and I could hear my mother's words coming out of her mouth. You're not even trying to make it special. That hurt more than I expected. My wedding is special to me and James, I said quietly. Well, it's not special to anyone else, Emma snapped. And if you really cared about me, you'd help me have something beautiful instead of keeping all your money for yourself. The conversation ended with Emma hanging up on me, and I realized that my entire family had painted me as the villain in this story. That night, I called my best friend Rachel, who lived across the country but had always been my voice of reason. Rachel, am I crazy? I asked after telling her the whole story. Am I really being selfish? Sarah, Rachel said firmly, you are being financially responsible and emotionally healthy. Your family is being manipulative and unreasonable. But what if Emma can't have a nice wedding? Then she'll have the wedding she and Marcus can afford, like most couples do. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about the answer. If the situation were reversed and you needed $15,000 for your wedding, do you honestly think Emma would give it to you? I thought about it for a long time. No, I said finally. No, I don't think she would. Then why are you expected to give it to her? It was a question I couldn't answer. 2 weeks before my wedding, when most of my family still wasn't speaking to me, my mother made one last attempt to get the money. She called me on a Thursday evening, and her tone was different, more serious, more final. I need to tell you something, she said. Your father and I have made a decision about your wedding. My heart started racing. What kind of decision? We've decided we can't attend if you don't help Emma with her wedding. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? We can't celebrate your marriage when you've refused to help your sister. It wouldn't feel right. And honestly, we're not sure we want someone so selfish in our family. I couldn't breathe. Mom, you're saying you won't come to my wedding. I'm saying we can't support someone who turns their back on family when they're needed most. Your grandmother feels the same way. And Emma certainly won't be there. So if I don't give Emma $15,000, my entire family will boycott my wedding. We prefer to think of it as having standards, my mother said coldly. Family helps family, Sarah. If you can't understand that, then maybe you've chosen to leave the family, not the other way around. After she hung up, I sat in stunned silence for over an hour. James found me there when he came home from work. They're not coming to the wedding, I whispered. James's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, anger, protectiveness. What exactly did she say? I told him word for word, and he listened with a growing expression of disbelief. Sarah, he said finally, that's emotional blackmail. That's not love. That's manipulation of the cruelest kind. But they're my family, I said, tears streaming down my face. No, James said firmly. Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't threaten to abandon you for having reasonable financial boundaries. This is abuse, Sarah. Financial and emotional abuse. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about walking down the aisle without my parents, without my sister, without my grandmother. I imagined the empty seats where they should have been sitting. I want to pause here to say something important. If you're in a situation where family members are threatening to cut you off unless you give them money, please know that their threats tell you everything you need to know about their priorities. Real family doesn't abandon you for setting boundaries. If these stories are helping you recognize manipulation in your own life, please subscribe to this channel. I share many stories about healing from family trauma and building healthier relationships. I wish I could tell you that I stood strong and didn't give them the money. But the truth is, 3 days before my wedding, I almost broke. I was sitting in my apartment looking at our wedding seating chart with all those empty family seats. And I started to reach for my phone to call my mother and tell her I'd give Emma the money. But James stopped me. Before you make that call, he said, I want you to think about what happens after you give them the money. What do you mean? I mean, what happens the next time Emma wants something expensive? What happens when your parents have another financial crisis? What happens when someone else in the family decides they deserve your money? I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. You'll be the family ATM, James said gently. Every financial problem will become your problem. Every expensive one will become your responsibility. And if you ever say no again, they'll use this same manipulation, threaten to cut you off, turn everyone against you, make you the villain. He was right, and I knew it. Sarah, he continued, I know this is the hardest thing you've ever done, but if you give them this money now, you'll never be free. There will always be another crisis, another emergency, another reason why you have to choose between your financial security and their approval. In the end, I didn't give them the money. My wedding day was beautiful, despite the empty seats where my family should have been. James's family and our friends surrounded us with love and support. It wasn't the day I had originally dreamed of, but it was real and honest, and it was the beginning of my journey toward emotional freedom. Emma did get married 6 months later, in a lovely but modest ceremony that cost about $8,000. She and Marcus paid for it themselves, and from what I heard, it was a beautiful day. She was perfectly happy with her wedding, proving that she never actually needed the expensive venue. The aftermath was complicated. Some family members gradually reached out to me over the following months, once they realized that the world hadn't ended, because I set a boundary. My grandmother, bless her heart, apologized about 8 months later, saying she realized she'd been manipulated into taking sides. My mother and Emma didn't speak to me for over a year. When we finally reconciled, it was with the understanding that our relationship had changed. I had learned to set boundaries, and they had learned that threats and manipulation wouldn't work on me anymore. The most important lesson I learned was this: Real family doesn't abandon you for having boundaries. Real love doesn't come with financial conditions. And sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who are willing to hurt you the deepest to get what they want. If you're dealing with financial manipulation from family members, please remember that you have the right to say no. You have the right to protect your financial future. And you have the right to relationships that don't come with a price tag. Thank you for listening to this story from my heart. It's one of the hardest experiences I've ever shared, but I hope it helps someone who might be facing similar pressure from their own family. If you enjoyed this story and found it helpful, please subscribe to Granny Stories and hit that notification bell. I share new family stories every week, and I read every comment you leave. Your support means the world to me, and together we're building a community where people can heal from difficult family relationships. Until next time, remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. And you deserve relationships that honor your worth, not exploit your love. Take care of yourselves, my dear listeners.